It's 12 o'clock. So, welcome to those on the call already and anyone joining shortly. This is number 7 in our little series of webinars. This time we're looking at having a good team, but people pulling in different directions and how to create uh, clarity, belonging, and alignment. And I'm going to be slightly distracted as I keep hitting the admit button when people join, so bear with me as we go. Yeah, this is us, David Bovis and Levent Turk from Ducks in a Row, and we are ready to start. So, what's the challenge? I think we're working around the world more and more as the company grows, and we bump into a lot of different companies in a lot of different sectors, and we see this challenge, this problem pop up all the time. It's that everybody assumes, and this is a you know what they say about assumption, that if you've got clear goals, everybody's going to pull in the same direction, and we're still surprised when it doesn't happen. Um, and what, if you dig into that just a little bit, we find out that people are experiencing, quite a lot of confusion, not really quite sure about where they're going and why they're going there. People functioning in silos, so not much collaboration. And that's leading to quite a lot of disengagement. And obviously, we've got all the Gallup stats that you've probably seen from us and from Gallup directly in the last few years, showing what a big problem that is globally. And so, from our point of view, the missing link is shared meaning and ownership, because I mean we use these words like shared meaning, but that means that there's similar wiring and firing patterns in brains. And ownership is all about chemical mix and the way our brains function, and whether we psychologically go towards something or away from something. And quite often, what we do in business and best practice triggers people to be defensive and to have an away from response. So that's the situation we're seeing in business everywhere around the world. It's not very different for anybody on the back of 50 years of best practice. But what we're also seeing is that when you introduce neuroscience language and we start thinking about this in terms of brain function, it changes and it improves. So, Levin, I mean, why isn't clarity alone enough? What's going on for people?
I think the mistake is some leaders generally believe that human is rational. So if we can construct our message very simply and very clearly, they will understand it. And if the message is reasonable, they will do it. But the result is different. Even though the message is very clear and reasonable, some people prefer not to follow it. Um, that's why even very good communication sometimes doesn't work. What's missing is engagement, connection between the sender of the message and the receiver. I think this is something is missing with the clarity.
Yeah, and again, if we put that in brain terms, if somebody's to perceive the world, see an outcome objective the same way as somebody else, especially when the first person said it and the other person's received it, there's got to be, alignment is about having wiring patterns in your brain that fire in similar ways, isn't it? And we're not going to think the same way about something. We're not going to really believe in and feel like we own that target, which we talk about in terms of alignment, if we haven't got similar brain wiring patterns firing about something. And so that requires the right amount of input to get people on the same page, singing from the same hymn sheet, all those old sayings. But it's actually deeper than that as well. And it's about belonging. If you don't see yourself as part of a journey, if you don't feel connected to a higher purpose, then that whole concept of belonging to the tribe, we're a herd animal. We need to feel, that also changes the way our brain responds to things. And if it's not there, you're just executing tasks. You're not really engaged and involved with what you're trying to achieve. And that's the big difference to discretionary effort, going the extra mile, getting the job done. And it also changes the way the chemicals in the brain work from a collaboration, problem solving, critical thinking point of view. So actually getting people to feel like they belong, having purpose, knowing the reasons why, is really what you need to get that deep alignment. So, I mean, this is where we come to our model, because it just makes everything so simple. Because as soon as you get this idea that beliefs are wiring pattern in your brain, that wiring has to fire to create any thought, whether it's what you keep inside your head or let out your mouth, and through your body language is a wiring pattern firing, going back to Hebbian law. And that there's a component, a psychological, neurological, chemical component in that we talk about in terms of emotions. So you can't separate thoughts from feelings, and therefore understanding how people feel and what they fundamentally believe that's triggering those feelings is absolutely crucial. Um, I mean, mate, would you add anything to that? I mean, I'm just thinking now, why don't you tell us, what this looks like at Toyota? How did you include people? I mean, what's going on? Because you've been renowned for having this fantastic culture. You worked there for 16 years and was country president. I can't think of anybody better to elaborate on this than you about Toyota.
At Toyota, like everywhere else, the alignment starts with the belief because if you believe similar things with other people, your behaviors will be similar too. That means you will be pulling in the same direction. If there is wherever there is a misalignment, you can be sure that there are beliefs which are working in different ways. If people have different beliefs, they will think, feel, and act differently. This is causing misalignment. At Toyota, before producing things or products, it's important to produce people and relationships, and it is done by principle-based practice. What are those principles? One is respect, one is teamwork. Because without teamwork, there is no collaboration, there is no alignment, and there is no performance, right?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
respect means giving everybody in the organization a certain level of autonomy, for example, to detect problems, to take countermeasures, take initiatives to do something. So everybody basically should know where the company is coming from and where it is going to and how they can contribute. And respect is a principle that is shown in every action that leaders take. And and when every leaders and all the employees follow this principle in daily actions, their beliefs and their actions become similar. So, in a way, you can say that they are fine-tuning their actions in the same direction to create alignment.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you, mate. That's really, and I'm going to highlight for those on the call listening and anyone that listens afterwards, I'm going to highlight a few key phrases here because I found they've clarified my thinking. I was in lean and continuous improvement around the world for 35 years, and I learned so much more when Levent and I started working together, having got it from, the original source. And these few key words that make so much difference when we start framing the way we look at the world and continuous improvement and change and transformation is principle-based practice, right? And I've learned from Levent over the years that Toyota actually look to make sure people are practicing in line with principles, i.e., you're tested on your capacity to show respect when conducting 8Ds and A3s, right? Doing problem solving. So that's really crucial. So one is this principle-based practice. It's the G and the R from a Japanese point of view. So, it's that respect that's really important. And then, but you said something just before you mentioned that, Levent. You said, and actually a famous quote from Fujio Cho when he was CEO in the early 2000s, he said, "We build people before we build cars," right? Or something to that effect. And you just said the same thing. It's about building people before you build product. And that goes back to that belief. There's an underlying belief. I think and again, it's another word you've introduced to me, Hitozukuri, if I'm pronouncing that right.
Yes.
And that's the philosophy that underpins the foundation that sits behind the principles when the principles sit behind the practice. And I think what we've done in the world for many, many years is focus on the tools, the techniques, the methods, the technology, the practice. And we've done that detached from principle or philosophy or a deep belief in putting people first. So I think that's the way it's starting to form in my mind after the 7 years we've been working together, which is fantastic. So hopefully that makes sense to everybody on the call.
In other words, even if your message is very, very clear, coming back to the subject in the previous page, if people doesn't find it meaningful or valuable, or even if they find it valuable and meaningful, but they are not included, probably they will not support you. They will not pull in the same direction.
Well, again, another fantastic phrase we now use on a regular basis because you said it once and we caught hold of it, is that you can't lead, sustainable change without the support of your people, right? And that's it. And the inclusion bit, when it comes to the neuroscience, has such a significant effect on the way people react and respond, doesn't it? So if you get that involvement up front, And this goes all the way up to big principle stuff like how you effectively execute your strategy, and the idea of catchball, the inclusion piece is the bit that makes the difference to the execution and the outcomes of a strategy, not the strategy itself so much, but the way you treat people on the way through and right from the beginning. So yeah, good stuff. So that's the alignment bit. That's the good side of the neuroscience. What's going on every day when we walk into the companies we're working with is that we see the misalignment piece, the bit that's not going right just yet because of the barriers that, let's call it best practice, has promoted in the world for the last 50 years that actually trigger brains to default to a defensive, away from psychological response. And this can be, these three statements here can be what people are saying to themselves in their head, which is one thing, or saying out loud to their colleagues. And if you hear this kind of thing, these should be red flags, right? I mean, I don't feel included in this is probably for me the most powerful one on this page because it taps into that part of brain function that's in the BTFA cycle, the feeling piece. What would you say about that, mate?
Yes, when we talk about misalignment or pulling in different directions, some of our friends are asking us how do you measure misalignment or alignment? This is like measuring love, for example. If you love something, if you love your country, how many percent do you love? 83 or 95? Can you measure it? When it comes to operational excellence or lean, the success depends on, again, teamwork and respect. How do you measure misalignment? If whenever you hear any of these sentences, that's not my priority, I don't feel included in this, etc., you should stop and deal with it. Otherwise, you can be sure that that person will not support you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost,
Nothing goes as planned. There will be always obstacles. Even you make the best decisions, life is complicated. It will never go straight forward. There will be a lot of obstacles along the way, and it's those people who will solve problems whenever they see problems. Whether they take responsibility when they see the problems, or whether they will say that's not my problem, shows the misalignment. So whenever you see any signs of this, it's time to stop and think about it.
yeah, it's all an emotional reaction that, we now understand as forming part of defense mechanisms, survival mechanisms, coping strategies, all this kind, and we all do it, right? We're all human. All of our brains have got so many similar component parts and use the same chemicals that these kind of behaviors are quite common because it's the way we're designed as human beings to survive our environment. But it just occurred to me, Levent, it's almost like, I mean, we know that Toyota are renowned for pulling the andon cord to stop the production line so that quality problems get addressed very quickly. This is what we're saying here, I think, is pull the andon cord on people's emotions, right? If you hear these telltale signals of I don't feel included, this doesn't make sense, why should I treat this as a priority? That's a language-based red flag to say that there's discomfort, and they're not aligned to the outcome objectives. So, what's the point in letting that fester and get worse and letting it build up? Let's deal with it here and now, the same as we do with quality problems, right?
Exactly.
Good stuff. Right. Oh, hang on, my cursor's gone. There it is. So I think, I mean, again, expanding on all of this, we see this more and more. And we've seen it going back the last 10, 15 years since, I've been teaching BTFA to people. And so I can go back to the recession when I was helping some companies in the Midlands in England there, or recent clients all over the world, sort of Middle East, across Europe and North America, Australia. We've spoken to so many people, South Africa, and we see the same thing. It's that you think that with a set of KPIs, OKRs, targets, a strategic deployment model, whether it's balanced scorecard, EFQM, whatever else it might be, and very clear roles and responsibilities in siloed, functions, where everybody knows what they've got to enact and enforce, to stick to regulation and legislation and be compliant. That means that you're gonna be aligned, and it just doesn't, because what all of that ignores, because it's very logical, is that human beings are very emotional in the way they respond. And we've got to understand the part of the system we're working with that is human beings, and to understand that talking about behavior and psychometric profiling isn't enough. We've got to get under the surface of that and talk about the actual binary mechanism at biological level to say, if a brain gets this kind of input, it's going to have this kind of response, with variation based on the individual. But in principle, this is what you're going to trigger if you create this kind of environment. And so, when leaders start to grasp this through, understanding and working knowledge of neuroscience, which we give them, then it starts to make the window they look through, a different color. They see things a different way. And that goes from understanding that we need shared belief, we need individuals to feel that ownership, and we need that to happen across the board if we're going to get the business to move forward and increase, what productivity improvement rates or whatever else it might be. Anything to add, mate, on that one?
No, it's great.
So, it's no good just talking about this in theory. What can you do about it? So what is the acid test question, isn't it? Always. And yeah, we can know about neuroscience, but so what? Well, so what is that if you get this stuff right and you get if you think of the people, process, systems triangle, and everything balances on people at the bottom of this triangle. Process and systems is what we focus on, but the people are the pivot piece. And if we get that right, all of those metrics, all of those outputs that you're looking to facilitate in an organization improve. So we mentioned earlier, problem solving, collaboration, cross-functional communication, top to bottom strategic deployment, all of these things improve. And so the way, in summary, what you've got to try and do, or in principle, is translate goals into beliefs. So it's not just about offering, a percentage improvement on this, on the EBITDA, dial, or it's about whether the people actually understand what EBITDA is for a start, feel that they've got a part in playing towards contributing towards that and actually want to. We're going back to our understanding, belief and belonging on the previous slide. So this is the game we're actually playing. It's about doing what, or creating the environment with our approach as leaders that provides brains those essential aspects of being alive in the world that they need if they're going to get to feel intrinsically motivated, which is a dopamine release mechanism. So now we know that it's about triggering the dopamine release. When we know how that happens, we can reverse engineer back to a solution and let it inform our approach to strategy deployment. It's about connecting goals, to identity and purpose. What makes people feel like they belong? Do they understand the future state outcome objective in the next 3 to 5 years from a strategic point of view and recognize that they're contributing to it? So when they feel like they're making progress towards that shared goal, that triggers that dopamine response because that's actually the mechanism in the brain that's in force. Um, and again, reinforcing belonging. Celebrate. We're so good at focusing on the negative and putting people down and beating people up. We've got a 10% EBITDA in-year target, and we get to 9.6% and beat everybody up for not getting the last 4%, rather than celebrating the 9.6% because it's so much better than the 7% we had last year. We're very good because of our negativity bias at always setting arbitrary figures as targets, as predictions about the future, and making everybody feel terrible if we don't quite get there, rather than feeling fantastic about the efforts we put in to get where we did get, given the geopolitical circumstances or whatever else we're facing. So, it's about shifting tone. It's about doing what's right for people. It's about doing what's right for brains. And when you get this right, teams perform better, problems get solved faster, change programs get executed quicker. And these are the things we're seeing in practice, greater ROI, shorter time frames, and better outcomes. Anything else, mate, on there?
No, that was a great explanation.
Thank you very much. So, what do we do? Obviously, we help leaders do this, but I'm not going to go through that too much now. We do workshops, we do the BTFA training, we do some sort of strategy deployment, consulting support, and things. But I want to quickly get to a question or two. Levent, do you want to finish off? Because I've done a lot of talking there. We've got 1 minute. If we stick to our 20 minutes, over to you, mate.
Yeah, a common question we receive is, can belonging really be built at work? Yes, why not? As David said, if you can connect the purposes of the company to individual beliefs, then it will be shared beliefs. as a BTFA model implies, people will think, feel, and act according to what they believe. So once they believe in our decision, we don't need to motivate them. This is a common mistake I see in workplaces. We try to motivate people. We don't need to motivate them. We cannot motivate them if they don't believe what we are doing. If they believe what we are doing, we don't need to motivate them. They are already motivated. Because everyone, as human beings, we all want to feel valuable. And to feel valuable, we should create, we should produce something valuable. And how do we define respect is opening ways or removing obstacles in front of people so that they can create some value, so that they will feel value. You can call it also inclusion. So in fact, it is not so difficult. You don't need to convince people to believe something. It's just about connecting the goals to their existing beliefs. So we should know the existing beliefs. How can we know? Just being aware of it. We can check how they feel and how they believe before taking any action, before starting any project or initiative. This will bring alignment.
Brilliant, mate. Fantastic. Yeah, and again, it's doing that for each other as well, isn't it? Just trying to remove the barriers, making the work as easy as possible, whether you're a leader or a colleague. Um, and again, what's the first step leaders can take tomorrow? Well, start thinking about what people believe because that's the driver of their actions, and start wondering how they feel about things, rather than just going into a project environment or a meeting environment and say, this is a project, this is what we've got to execute. What do you think about that? Because you've got this technical skill. Actually make it more human and go, hang on, how's everybody feeling about this? Are we all on the same page? Do we know what we've got to achieve and in what time frames? And how does it, is anyone reeling, thinking, oh my God, this is just going to tip me over the edge. I can't cope, because if you don't address that up front, it's only going to happen anyway. So it's just about being a bit more human, I think, in many respects. Super. Well, I know we're on time. So just very, very briefly, last 30 seconds, because we're 2 minutes over actually, is, you know, the recap, clarity, having just clear logical information is not enough when it comes to the way brains function. There's got to be this emotional, and Levent used the word a minute ago, connection. Human beings feeling like they're connected is the big differentiator. It changes the way the chemicals shift in the brains and it gets rid of that project drift. Okay, so belief-driven alignment. If you like Levent, again, Levent's already covered all of this in what he just said. If people believe in things because of the way that triggers dopamine and serotonin mix in the brain and increases oxytocin levels, that is the definition of intrinsic motivation. So if you get the beliefs, the inclusion bit right, you're going to naturally get that forward momentum because people are going to be working to contribute. So hopefully that all makes sense. You're more than welcome to give us a call. There's an email there you can write to us on. There's the website you can contact us through. If you're not connected with us already on LinkedIn, please do so. And join us again in a month's time for another webinar when we talk about the neuroscience of some subject or another. So if you've got anything you're really interested in, fire it across. Let us know what you'd like us to cover, and we'll frame it through the brain lens. Any final words, mate?
Just one thing. All our recommendation and advices are in fact summarized in BTFA. We have created a model that will help you to see workplace and problems in the workplace in a different way. Using BTFA, you will be able to reduce or eliminate the problem of misalignment. Thanks for joining.
Brilliant. Thanks all. See you again soon. Cheers. Bye.